Welcome to the final episode of this season of Amidst the Ordinary. You may remember Jake from previous episodes, but unlike other episodes, we will be journeying with him only.
To wrap up this season, we dive deep with Jake about community impact. How can we love our communities to life? How can we show up in our communities well?
This episode really ties together all of the concepts from the season through one individual's story.
Jake had to undo some incorrect assumptions he had about the way God thought about his work.
He learned that God cares about his work as a community leader, just as God cares about your work as a barista, a welder, a teacher, a pastor, etc.
All of life is ministry. All of life is the place for God's kingdom to be on display. Whether you are a pastor or a plumber, our life and work matters to God.
So let's hear more about how this truth was on display in Jake's life.
My name is Jake Ayers. I am currently living in a small town about an hour south of Atlanta, Georgia, called Hogansville. We're a small town, about 3,500 people, and my wife and I moved here just over 7 years ago. We were actually kind of recruited to move here. Some good friends of mine were from this community, had been born and raised here and never spent a lot of time, pouring into this community. It was always kind of, hey, how do we get out of small town USA and pursue bigger things, whether it's business or different creative endeavors. Those things historically have been hard to pursue in a small town. We moved here 7 years ago with a heart and a vision to just try to bring life and start a revitalization kind of project here in this community. My background in my 20s was mostly in ministry full time. I went to school for ministry and for leadership in ministry. I also have kind of a background in music. And so I had pursued full-time ministry for several years, and I was a college pastor, youth pastor, as well as a worship pastor at a relatively large church in our area. And it was good. And we were living in, felt like what was our calling and my calling, my wife and I. But pretty quickly after getting married, I began to feel there was this tension in my life where I felt called to pursue these different entrepreneurial and creative endeavors. And I didn't know how to manage that with my calling for ministry. So it was almost like you had to pick one or the other. You're either going to be called to ministry or you're going to be called to business and then just be one of those business guys that shows up to church on the weekend. I began to realize it's okay to step out of vocational ministry and to pursue other avenues. And some very close friends of mine had a vision to come back to this community that they were from. They had gone all over the world, both married, two young guys my age, one married someone from Argentina, another married a girl from Romania. And so they had spent a lot of time out of the country and then somehow felt called at a similar time frame to come back to small town USA to bring this community back to life. And so then they approached me. We said, okay, well, what does that look like? And really what it boiled down to, if I can really simplify it from the beginning, the questions we were asking is, if we think about reviving a community, what would it look like for us to create the type of community that we want to live in? We sold our house. We moved here, rented a little apartment in one of the old historic buildings downtown. And so every morning, every night, we're standing on Main Street. And if you can picture this small town in USA, it's about exactly what you would imagine. An old Main Street, all of these old historic buildings, and probably 85% of them closed, run down. Lots of work needed to be done. So for us, it was kind of a canvas of, okay, anything that we can dream up is possible. One of the very first things that we realized we needed to do was to create what we call that third space, which is, it's not my home, it's not my workplace. So for us, it was a coffee shop was the very first business that we started. And so we knew that we needed some sort of vehicle to get people to town so that we could start talking about our plans to try to revive this place. And then we slowly started to acquire more and more of the real estate buildings. And so as we acquired more and more of the real estate, we began to kind of come up with the ideas to try to figure out how to incubate the businesses to put into that. And that led us to starting an organization called Pioneer. And the idea was that the Pioneer would be the face of this revitalization project. Most of what we wanted to do really led itself to be more in the nonprofit, meaning we weren't going to make money off of it. But really, as we began to incubate business after business, it became, well, how do we recruit more people to come here? Because it's fine for me to have a good idea, but if you don't have the what we call the champion to champion that particular business or that idea, then it's just an idea, right? There's tons of people that can have ideas, but the only way you can execute on these different things is if you have the right people in the right seats that can push these projects forward. It was one of those things that the more and more we asked ourselves, well, what does revitalizing a community look like? And it brings up a lot of hard questions, right? Because number one, we're new young guys coming into a very old, established community, but you can't just come in and be the guy that say, hey, your community's dying and it's really bad, so we want to fix it, right? And so you can imagine how you have to be very careful how you present your goals and your visions, because there's plenty of people that say, hey, we love our community just the way that it is. In fact, we moved here because it was a sleepy old town with nothing going on. A lot of them are older, retired. The economic development of this community doesn't necessarily affect them. They think that if you start a business that I don't want to go to, then that business doesn't help me. Well, rising tides lift all ships. We're just kind of in a very boring, typical space in America, an hour outside of a city. So what are the things that the surrounding people would cause them to want to come to our little town? Creating strong destination type businesses that will drive people here. We have a lot of old antique stores because people love going to small old towns to find antiques, right? Well, there's actually a concept that if you have one antique store, you might get some business. But if you have 2 or 3 antique stores, every single Saturday, there will be people packed down to come look at antiques because they know they can come to an antique store. And an antique store specifically is one of those types of stores that people want to go in multiple. And for whatever reason, a certain type of people, and I'm probably even one of those, and I know I was in the past, if you drive through an area and you see a whole street side of antiques and cool old looking items, it just compels you to stop. And so we have 2 or 3 antique stores and have historically had those, and that was about it. So now, trying to continue to see what it looks like to incubate businesses. So with Pioneer in the early stage, what we tried to do with our model was, can we provide a space, maybe at little or no rent, because we were at a place where we could do that, and get a business model off the ground, and then find the champion to take it on, and then let them flourish, and then give them kind of a runway to get this business off the ground, whether that's through coaching, whether it's through low rent. And then hopefully as it becomes successful, is if this individual, is the right person and in the right place, then hopefully they can kind of flourish and begin to take some ownership. That sounds good in theory, but it's extremely hard because if you are a business owner, or if you're especially a small business owner, you understand the grind that it takes to get the business off the ground, 50, 60-hour weeks with little to no pay. And if you are not the individual who is doing that, it becomes really hard to get buy-in, right? So if I come to you and I say, or if I go to anyone, I say, hey, I have an idea. I want to open up a coffee shop. Well, there are 24 people that say, oh, you know what? I have a dream, especially in this current environment. I have a dream to run a coffee shop. Okay, great. Can you come to the coffee shop? I need you to get here at 5 a.m. I need you to work until 6 p.m. I need you to do it for little and maybe even no money this week. How does that sound? Most people are going to say, no, thanks. But that's what it takes to get a business off the ground. And so we learned a lot of hard lessons through the last several years. It's been a lot of trial and error, but we are slowly but surely, seeing more and more people buy into the vision of wanting to come here. So it's cool. There's this old saying, and I'm sure it's not that old, but it's something that tons of people know and have heard. But if you want to do anything of significance or anything of good quality, it's going to take twice as long than you expected, and it's going to cost twice as much. And that is significantly truer when you find yourself trying to make a long-lasting impact in a community. The thing about community is it's dirty because it's about people, right? It's if all I care about is making my business successful, I can do that relatively easy. I can make shifts. I can kind of make changes in order to reach my target audience. And if I don't really care about the success of the people around me, well, then it's not really about community, right? It's just about me making my business successful. That is an ingredient to a healthy community is having a lot of successful individuals. But when it comes to being the individuals that are really trying to intentionally build community, is that time is one of the most valuable aspects that you can give people as it pertains to relationships. And so if we had not spent the time with the people here, it didn't really matter what we were saying or what we were trying to do. And there's this concept of relational equity, meaning I've spent enough time with you and I've spent enough hours building a relationship with you that the relational equity we have gives me a platform and gives me the opportunity to ask you to trust me, and vice versa. I've had struggles throughout my life of committing more than a certain period of time to certain things, right? And because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a kind of a visionary mindset type of person, I'm constantly wanting to start something new. And I just have ideas, not because I don't like what I started. It's just, okay, I get something started and I have another idea that I want to pursue, right? And a lot of people are that way. But it takes an enormous amount of time to stay committed to something for the long haul. And for us, let's say for my family and I didn't come here expecting to leave, within a couple of years, but you turn around and, 7 years has gone by and you think, man, we've been doing this for quite a while and maybe we're seeing some results. Maybe we're not seeing the results we want to see. So maybe I start thinking, well, maybe we should think about doing this somewhere else, right? And quite frankly, going back to the original portion of the story, myself and the guys that I kind of consider my partners here, we always had a dream to kind of create something that was replicatable in other communities, because I think what we experience here is not unique to our community. There's communities all over the world and all different types of cultures. And there's young people, there's old people that are desperate to have a healthy, thriving community. When it gets discouraging, you have to put yourself up against, okay, well, is being here what you still want to do? Is building this community what you still want to do? And I've been confronted with that more often than I would probably like to admit. And thankfully, we've kind of just continued to feel like this is where we're supposed to be. This is our calling. To the degree that a couple of years ago, after pouring and serving into this community, I decided to go a completely different direction than anything I had ever thought I would do, and run for public office for our community. Every hour that I spend counts. And so we had spent about 5.5 years building this community, and we began to realize that the local leadership were the ones, like if they continued to make the types of decisions that they were making, and keep in mind, small community, it's been ran the same way for roughly 40 or 50 years, right? So that mindset is integrated deep in the roots of the current leaders. If that stayed the same, almost everything we were doing was going to be not completely wasted, but at the end of the day, it was going to make our jobs a lot harder, because those types of elements are things that the city actually can control. One of the big things that we knew that was coming up was a total changeover in leadership, or the opportunity for changeover, meaning the previous mayor, who had pretty much been running the city for the last 20 years, as well as 3 council seats, were up for re-election. And so we started thinking through and praying through, well, what would it look like if people that we knew were on those, had those seats, were in that. And of course, as people are putting their, throwing their ideas around, my name continued to get thrown in to the top of the list to run for the mayor of our city. And very long story short, and against all of what I thought was going to be true in my life, I ran and got elected to be the mayor of our town. So I am currently the mayor for the city of Hogansville, and I have been so for the last 2 years. And it's another 2-year term, so it's 4 years. It's a 4-year term. Essentially, I'm kind of the figurehead and the visionary and driver in the official capacity for the city at this point, in any city in the world, right? A very small handful of people are making the decisions that affect all of our lives, right? And that's true on a national stage, but in a more very localized sense, you being able to do certain things within your city, the city ordinances, the types of things that your city allows, that's decided by a handful of people. So the council members are who decide those things, that they're the ones that vote on these items. I'm the individual that puts things before them. So I'm working alongside of our city manager, who is running the day-to-day operations of the city. A couple of good friends of mine actually took those city council seats. So I think for the first time in what I would like to say at least 30 to 40 years, we have a very good leadership team that have a united approach. We don't always think the same. We don't always have the same opinions, but we have a very united approach of what it looks like to lead our city as a whole forward. And hopefully that's going to help create some more sustainability for what it looks like to grow a healthy community. When you put yourself out there to run for public office and you actually get elected, once you get in, it's a serious commitment, right? And so going back to the time conversation, I knew that if I took on this role and I won, it was going to be a 4-year commitment. It's not just another 4 years of living in the city, but it's 4 years of compounding any problems that I already had in my life. And I'm taking all the problems of our community and putting it on my shoulders. And then myself, not by myself, but myself and our team has to try to figure out how to problem solve. And so I knew going into it that this 4-year commitment was a big deal. And so quite frankly, I prayed through and I was like, God, if this is not supposed to be it, please don't let me win. Like, I do not want to win this position and take 4 years of my life and my family's life and dealing with everybody's problems. However, what I learned very quickly is that although it's tough and it's hard and takes more time and you don't get paid very much, you can get a lot done as a local elected official. We've seen a very, I guess I would call fruitful past couple of years, and just a lot of changes that are going to help the city 20 years from now. Because it's easy for people to get excited about the next new thing, right? The next new business, the next new shiny object. That's easy to get excited about. But if we're talking about community and what it looks like to build healthy communities, I have to think about what this community looks like when my children are 20 years old, right? I have to think about what this looks like for my grandchildren. Is the community that I'm building now the type of place that my grandchildren are going to want to live? So there's a lot that can be done.
I love it that we're doing a story that is local. We've heard a lot of stories from all over the world, and hearing that you do not necessarily have to go somewhere else to see that same kind of community impact. And I think Jake took it pretty far.
Yeah.
But it's pretty amazing. And I really enjoyed listening to his story.
Yeah, there's so much there.
Yeah.
Like, he touched on a lot. And in some ways, I think when I'm tempted while I'm listening to be like, this doesn't really apply to me. I'm not a mayor.
Yeah.
I am not a community leader, perhaps. I'm not building legislation or listening to people or doing anything of like some kind of high level importance. But then when I really like get down to what he's talking about, like building a community that I want like my kids to be able to live in and thrive in, or even just the community that I am in now that I want to thrive, like that comes down to like individuals.
And he didn't start out as the mayor. He started out as an entrepreneur, which started out with him just living in this town. And I think obviously everyone has different skill sets, so we might not be opening up coffee shops, but I think there's still a lot of power in us as individual human beings, and especially when we come together with different strengths. And the Lord can use us to literally change whole communities if we allow him and we're open to it.
Yeah. And that's just like another reminder, is like what God could do with your yes.
Yeah.
With your obedience, with you being willing to be led by him and go to where he wants you to go.
Yes.
And you can see communities and environments transformed. So
yeah.
I also, the thing that spoke most to me is his grit. Because he said his personality is like, I'm ready for the next new thing. But his story, this is 7 years in the same place. And they started off in a town that might not wanted that change. And I think that's something to keep in mind anyways, where you are. Maybe they don't want change, right?
Yeah.
So it takes time to build relationships. And obviously, the people in the town thought it was worthwhile getting him into the position of mayor.
Yeah.
So that a couple of things went really well there in listening to people, having time for people, using your gifting. But he said something at the end on, let me see. Yeah, being discouraged. So there was a lot of pushing through. So I guess that's a takeaway for me. Now living in a new community in another country, sometimes you get a little discouraged because you don't really see the change that you want to see. But this is only 2 years.
Yeah.
Nothing. And thinking of Karis and David, like after 4 years of people looking at us, observing. So there's a couple of times. It takes time and grit and highs and lows.
And going back to what you said, I feel like, and this is definitely challenging me, I would have almost just assumed, people probably don't want the change, so I'm not even going to try. But him building the relationships and listening made me learn that people did want this change.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between him like coming in and being like, here are my things and here's what we're going to do. Or rather, he really did listen. And he listened with his life, And so even though maybe when he first got there, they were like, we don't need this or we don't want this. Maybe like over time with that relational equity he was talking about, they realized that they needed it, even if they didn't necessarily originally want it.
Yeah.
So you said earlier, like, hey, I don't think any of us maybe are necessarily mayor material. People.
I don't know. Darian's mayor material. He's just not the mayor.
Maybe.
You said something that you would apply some of these things in your own life. I'm just curious, hearing a story like that, how do you translate that to our ordinary lives?
I think just realizing that one person can make a huge difference. And just by like all the things we've talked about in this podcast so far, listening and being with people, togetherness, and all of that, even if it's not in the same ways, everything we do has a ripple effect and can really transform a community if we say yes.
Exactly. And I like that you said if we say yes. That's all it takes is our yes. We say yes, and then we have an impact on someone else who's going to go and say yes, and they're going to continue to ripple effect it down to just I'm looking for a different word, but a huge impact, which is just absolutely amazing for just the overall mission of the land, I guess. Yeah.
I think one takeaway is with Jake's story, and it doesn't come out super, he's not emphasizing it a lot, but he wasn't on his own. Yeah. He was there with his wife, and there were some other people involved. Yeah. And again, I think that would make it so much easier to go for the long term. Yeah. So short term, you can give all your energy you got, but how long can you fake it? Yeah. But this is together, you can just go a lot longer, obviously, and now they're seeing some positive change.
Yeah, that was something I found encouraging also. Like, it started with Jake, but maybe from the very beginning it was more than just him. But like it was never just him. Yeah. And he was talking about like how he's, a visionary. He's ready to move on to the next thing, and how he has been at this for 7 years. And I'm thinking like, who are the people he's surrounding himself with that's helped keeping him grounded? Yeah. Because I think there are people on my team that are visionaries, and I'm not particularly that way all the time. Sometimes big picture is hard, but I think just the different skill sets that I'm sure he surrounded himself with that got him to year 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because he can have all the vision, but he ultimately would need people to carry out the vision. And like you said, I'm someone who I'm really good at getting things done. I might not have the idea, but I can get it done. And so no matter what we're skilled in or what our shape is, God can definitely use us.
And once again, it goes back to the community where we all come together and piece it together to get things done.
Yeah.
Better together, not meant to do life alone.
No, yeah.
What did you guys think of his earlier stage where he had to kind of like work through some confusion on am I going to be in ministry or work, and how he solved that?
I mean, I think that's almost the whole point of our gifts, is to go out into the world and use them as a ministry, or not even to view work as ministry, but just to view everything that we do as an opportunity to glorify God.
Yeah.
All of life is God's domain, so we don't have to regulate what he wants to do in just one sphere of life and name that ministry and move on, but rather like all of life is ministry, and every moment you're bringing his kingdom just because you're his. You're designed by him. So I think it was interesting to hear him. I feel like he sort of came to that same place. In a very like organic way as he was living life.
I would like to almost ask him, like, where did you see more kingdom impact? When you were a youth pastor or as a mayor?
I actually have a feeling it would be probably as a mayor, because I feel like he's seeing so many more things there from kingdom impact standpoint. It's probably like just that one lens of like the Christian point of view. But as a mayor, he's seeing like the community point of view. He probably gets a little bit of that spirituality as well as like the different lives that he's dealing with on a day-to-day basis within the community that he's a part of.
And the community is watching him. Even more now, so probably.
It's like he let the things I'm sure he learned and was equipped with when he was preparing for some kind of full-time ministry gig. And he was like, actually, all of this applies to every aspect of my life. He was like, the gospel transforms every single circle of life. And now he gets to touch every single circle in his new role. So that's cool.
I think if this podcast goes viral, it'll have busloads of people coming to Hogansville.
Jake's gonna be like, no pictures.
No pictures.
Have you guys been in Hogansville?
I have not.
I drove through one time.
I haven't.
It's a fun city. It's a town, actually.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Because I don't know if he mentioned it. I think it was like 3,200 or so people or something. Yeah,
that's small.
That is small. I'd probably go crazy.
Jake brings such a unique perspective to this conversation, one we can all benefit from. As always, though, these episodes are just the beginning. Make sure to go deeper by signing up for a free 10-day devotional linked in the podcast notes or on our website, scatterglobal.com.
Music for this podcast was provided by Zach Winters from his new album, Shade of Indigo, which you can stream everywhere. You can find more about Zach and his music and poetry at zachwinters.com. This podcast was produced by Pete Hicks and the Mycelium Collective in partnership with Scatter Global. Concept and design for this podcast by Peter Jan Rodenberg, Alyssa Valentine, Kristen Boyd, Ewout Van Oosten, and Pete Hicks, and recording engineering help from Doug Donner.